Hello and welcome to Dialogue. China Brand Day falls on May the 10th with a big event running until the 12th. This is the 5th year for the event, which promotes Chinese brands to both domestic and foreign consumers. To find out what is happening with it this year and whether the reputation of Made in China is rising, I'm joined by Victor Yang Xueliang, Senior Vice President and Spokesperson from Geely Holding Group. Hong Hao is Chief Strategist at the Bank of Communications International. And Andy Mok is Senior Research Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. Welcome, gentlemen. That's our topic. I'm Wang Guan. Gentlemen, I want to ask all of you the same question to start with. I mean, China says it wants to go from made in China to created in China with more globally recognizable brands, international big brands. How has China fared so far from your vantage point? Victor, let me go to you first.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. Talking about the car industry, I think we have witnessed really rapid growth nationwide, not only in terms of sales volume, but also in the improvement of the innovation capability and the overall quality of the entire value chain. Taking Geely as an example, we have been growing really fast in the past 2 years. Remember 10 years ago, we can only sell somewhere between 300,000 units to 400,000 units. But in the past few years, we have achieved 1.5 million sales only, in China, and we are actively export our cars to overseas market as well. I think the Chinese car brand is not anymore recognized only as a low-cost option for consumer here in China and in other parts of the world as well. They are recognized as both, with all the technology, with really good quality standard and all the equipment level, but also with very appealing retail pricing. So I think the Chinese car will be more and more attractive as the nation is growing fast and the technology innovation capabilities is increasing fast as well.
Yeah, 5 years ago, when I backpacked across Latin America, I saw a lot of Geely cars in Cuba and across Latin America. I was really surprised back then. Mr. Hong Hao, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I think it's part of the process of China upgrading its manufacturing industry. Back then, most of the Chinese manufactured goods are basically located at the bottom end of the value chain. So, for all the goods that we're producing, even though we're producing huge volume of goods and export them, we weren't able to make too much out of these exports, because they are very low value-added goods. So I think now, the Chinese industry has matured to a certain stage that it's necessary, and also, the condition is arrived, for an industry upgrade. I think in recent years we've seen very good examples of upgrading the industry. For example, just now, we discussed about Geely, and also this year, we have some very good example in the consumer industry. For example, Li-Ning, which is a leading athletic brand in China, because of the trade spreads between China and the U.S. And also, some other idiosyncratic reasons. Li-Ning was able to capture huge amount of sales growth and market share in domestic China, and also is getting raving review in the international fashion arena. So I would say that these are very good examples of Chinese industry upgrading, and I think going forward we'll be able to see more and more examples of these success stories.
Yeah, Andy, I know it is hard to generalize Chinese brands. There are so many categories of goods and products out there. But generally speaking, where do you think is the standing of China brand today versus where it was years or maybe decades ago?
Sure, Wang Guan. Well, I think that the growth of China's brands has really been nothing short of remarkable, that has paralleled China's phenomenal economic growth and the recognition that has gotten around the world. It wasn't that long ago when the most well-recognized brand outside of China was Tsingtao beer. Now today, there are many, many brands, and a lot of them in cutting-edge industries. Look at Huawei, for example, not just in smartphones, but in networking equipment and broadly recognized as a technology leader. There are companies like in that space as well, Xiaomi, of course, Oppo in other parts of the world have done very, very well. Look at TikTok as well as another example, I think, of companies that have really broken through and gained global respect. And of course, there are a number of consumer brands like Haier, Midea as well, that really have gotten a lot of traction, TCL. The list goes on. So I think the growth of Chinese brands has really been nothing short of phenomenal.
Yeah, Mr. Hong Hao, let me circle back to you. I mean, this year during the China Brand Day, the officials said the theme is dual circulation and new consumption. How do you understand this new consumption keyword? What does the new specifically refer to?
Yeah, well, I think, ever since the trade beds in 2018, early 2018, it's a growing recognition of China needs to be more self-reliant. For example, in the semiconductor industry, just because someone cutting off our semiconductor supply, Huawei wasn't able to manufacture as many mobile handsets as possible. All right, so this year, for example, if you look at the numbers, Huawei's market share, especially in Europe, is dropping down a couple of places already, and I think it has further to drop, just because of the inventory shortage of semiconductors. So I think it's extremely important, for us to recognize this shortage, and to overcome it in as little time as possible. So I think the dual circulation strategy is a longer-term strategy. I think right now, because of the virus situation, the U.S. demand for Chinese goods is still huge. For example, this year you see a huge record U.S. trade deficit against China. But then I think going forward, as Biden spend more and more domestically, invest in infrastructure and also invest in U.S. making the USA sort of facilities, then you probably will see increase gradually less demand for Chinese goods. So I think, and at the same time, the Chinese domestic market has matured to such a stage that it has generated huge domestic demand for Chinese goods. I think just now we mentioned a lot of Chinese brands not only is being recognized internationally, but also domestically they are hotly demanded as well. So I would say that the dual circulation strategy is really focusing on long-term aspects of how to grow the Chinese industries sustainably going into the future.
So, Victor, let me ask you, I mean, what do these initiatives, such as, new consumption, dual circulation, what do they mean for a company like Geely?
Well, I think there are several meanings. First, I think the car industry is global in nature. We still need to work with global partners in technology innovation, in supply chain synergy. Let me give you an example. We acquired Volvo 10 years ago. We have been working with Volvo since then on multi-level corporations. We are still thinking to deepen our cooperation in developing the next generation EV architecture, key components, autonomous driving software capability building, and also the share of marketing and service capability globally. But coming to China, I think there is a strong trend of the Chinese consumer to upgrade their needs for the car solution, especially with a focus on electrification and sustainability. So we have to invest heavily in creating the most leading technologies in electrification, connectivity, autonomous driving, and shared mobility service. I do see a trend of the Chinese car makers is really competing with global makers on the front end. I can give you an example. We have just launched a new EV brand called Vicker. This is a high-end, or we call premium smart EV brand, which focus on a car portfolio with a pricing range from 300,000 RMB to like $500,000. But we have just launched the new first car, Vicker 001, last month, and we showed the cars on the Shanghai International Auto Show, which is a sensation. It's quite well received by the Chinese consumer. We have a lot of orders coming. So we do see that there is a trend of operating the needs from the consumer, which requires OEM to invest heavily in the R&D capability in creating new competitive edge, such like autonomous driving and shared mobility solutions.
Yeah. Andy, talking about Chinese brands outside of China, I think it would be fair to say that China and Chinese brands still have a long way to go. I mean, as popular as some of the products are inside China, globally, their recognition levels could still be furthered, let's put it that way. What do you think are the barriers, I mean, facing the outside consumers outside China from purchasing and recognizing Chinese brands?
Well, that's a great point, Wang Guan. I think the journey is indeed long, but I do think that many Chinese companies have made significant progress in building effective, perhaps we could even say, great brands around the world. So brands are really nothing more than a promise to the consumer. And I think to build a lasting, successful brand, you have to start with a great product, first of all. And then you have to create awareness, interest, desire, and action, meaning the buying of the product. So I think China's come a long way in terms of building dependable products at a decent price, and I think that's well recognized. The piece that's missing that I think is being filled in is the marketing. So creating the branding, the advertising, including the distribution as well. And this is, I think, the next frontier for many companies. Now, some, of course, have done quite well. Huawei, I think we've touched on. Other companies, Geely, of course, I think has done well globally as well, not just with its own brand, but also acquiring foreign brands as well, which is another very effective portfolio strategy for increasing a Chinese entity's global impact.
I mean, Mr. Hong Hao, I mean, what do you think as a professional in the financial services sector? I mean, what do you think Chinese brands can still do to really further boost their popularity and their recognition globally?
Well, I think different industries face different challenges. I think in terms of branding-wise, I think the consumer industry and also, for example, consumer electronic industry is going very far. Just now we mentioned Huawei, Xiaomi, for example, as the key Chinese mobile brand, that is venturing overseas. Consumer software, for example, TikTok is, one of the most downloaded app on the Apple App Store. And also, in terms of the consumer durables, for example, Geely just now mentioned a number of models that is being reviewed very favorably in the international arena. So I think, some of the industries we've gone quite far, because these are the industries that, we put in a lot of capital in the years earlier and invested huge R&D, ongoing R&D into these industries. And therefore, these industries are now reaping the fruits of, earlier years' investments. But then, some other industries we still need to be developed, especially the high-tech industry, healthcare, financial service. I think, there is no internationally recognized financial service brand from China, for example. I think many of the Chinese banks and especially Chinese investment banks, were doing very well, have been doing very well in the domestic market and also in the regional market. But I think in terms of international branding-wise, I haven't seen a sort of a global house just yet, but we're getting there. Some of the brokers are up and coming, and they've invested heavily overseas. So I think it is a long-term process, as we discussed just now. It takes time, efforts, money, and labor, and ongoing efforts to cultivate the brands.
Yeah, talking about getting there, Geely is one of the examples here. In Brand Finance's 2020 report, Geely was ranked 9th among the most valuable global brands, auto brands actually, the only Chinese automaker featured in the top 10 ranking. It is also the first time that a Chinese automaker appeared in this ranking. So Victor, I mean, how did Geely do this?
Well, I think that's a recognition from the consumer and the industry on the improved innovation capability and quality standard, also the profitability level of Geely Auto, but also a recognition for the success cooperation of Geely within our global partners like Volvo, like Daimler, like Lotus and Proton, and also we are investing a lot in the build-up of what we call the core technology. It's not only recognized for the manufacturing side, but rather for the technology content of the car and the entire value chain. And also, I think we have grown rapidly together with our consumer, but we see a trend that the consumer has a demand on the overall experience on the entire customer journey. I mean, in the entire life cycle of the car. So we are investing a lot in building up the service capability as well. To make the brand even more appealing in the next few years, I think we need to keep the momentum of being really connected with the consumer, but also let them recognize that we are the leader in the new technology areas such as electrification and autonomous drive. That's why we are still working really hard with our partners, really invest a lot, really trying to captivate the real needs from the consumer and create a experience that will exceed the expectation from the consumer.
Andy, talking about made in China, the stereotype was, it could be cheap, could be affordable. So how can these Chinese brands penetrate the Western and the U.S. markets going forward?
Well, I think Geely is a great example here in that, of course, the core has to be good technology, a great product. But for great brands, they have to also create an emotional connection with the customer. And we see great brands around the world have managed to do that. And I think this is one area that is an opportunity for a lot of Chinese companies, and they are focusing on this, is that how do you create that emotional bond with your customer? And is that through service, if you're an automobile company, or the sales process that is very high touch, not just high tech? So I think this is one of the areas that requires cultural insight, requires investment, of course, and I think most of all requires executive action, meaning the commitment of senior leadership of companies looking to become truly global brands.
Mr. Hong Hao, small and medium-sized enterprises in China are the most active players in the market, contributing to jobs, tax revenue. What efforts and contributions do banks like yours make for Chinese companies to really upgrade their goods and services on one hand, but also their brands globally?
Yeah, well, I think during the coronavirus pandemic situation, I think the SMEs are doing it very tough. Under the guidance of the government, my bank as well as other big Chinese commercial banks have a lending target. We set aside minimum 30% of our lending, towards many of these SMEs to help them to overcome this period of difficulties. I think going forward, all the great brands are, starting very small. I still remember many years ago, Geely was not as powerful and as big as it is right now, and now it's ranked number 9 in the world. And I think many of the smaller Chinese brands also have potential. For example, in Shenzhen, many of the high-tech companies started very small as well. Dajiang, for example, Dajiang International, now it's an international powerhouse in terms of the drone manufacturing and production. And there are many other good examples as well. So I think many of these great brands nowadays started from a very small scale, and they have been one of our best customers. For example, Dajiang is one of our key customers for our bank. I'm sure there are plenty of other examples as well. So I think going forward, because SME is such an important part of our economy, so we'll just make sure that we out of all the total lending that we're doing for our community, a certain amount of percentage is being set to help this SME to continue to grow.
Yeah, gentlemen, I want to talk about a trend whereby you see an increasing number of Chinese, especially the younger generation. We call them Generation Z, meaning those who were born after 1985. Unfortunately, myself excluded. Victor, let me go to you. Do you think there is such a thing? Did you observe this phenomenon whereby an increasing number of younger Chinese find Chinese goods and products such as Geely attractive?
Yes, of course. I think there are surveys from different internet platforms showing that more than 75% of the younger generation of Chinese consumers are willing to buy real good quality Chinese products. It's the same for Geely as well. I can give you an example. I think among the Geely buyers, say for about 35 or 40% of the buyer of Geely products used to have GV brand products, but they are now moving from GV or foreign brands to Chinese brands now. And they like our brands, of course. And I think, especially for the smart EV sector, there is a strong trend that the Chinese younger consumer are willing to try new tech, like autonomous driving, and they are willing to pay more for what we call a software service, OTA. I think the Chinese brand, not only the car industry, but other industry as well, have to capture the opportunity and really make our product and service more appealing to the younger Chinese consumers, including our service. I can give you an example for the finance service as well. We have set up a car financing company called Genius AFC, and 35% of the customers can drive their cars home the same day they visit the store. That means the finance service really make car ownership more available to a larger group and a younger group of people. And 50% of consumers are using finance service. And more than 20% of them who use finance service say that they want to use it again if they buy a new car. So I think that they have more expectations for convenient service as well. That's why we need to pay more attention and invest more to build up the service capability as well.
Yeah, Andy, in America, actually, President Joe Biden signed an executive order recently to strengthen what he says Buy American provisions. That is a provision, of course, under the slogan, he wants more Americans to buy their own products. I mean, how different is this really from Made in America, Buy America plan initiated by Trump when he tried to really appeal to his Rust Belt voters and blue-collar voters mostly? How are these two initiatives different?
Well, I think they're largely the same in one way, Wang Guan, in that they are expressing a concern, as you say, for Rust Belts, I would say perhaps blue-collar workers, in that these jobs are seen as the backbone of the American economy. So to the degree that there are policies that encourage the creation of these jobs or the retention of these jobs and make them more dependable, certainly is a good thing. Now, I think the challenge, though, is that while this is an important goal, it shouldn't be the only goal, because we touched on earlier about China, well, being made in China versus designed in China or created in China. And here we can look at the iPhone as an example, where the gross margin for Apple on an iPhone is about $500, and we could attribute that really to the brand power. So the rest of the money goes for parts, labor, etc. But commercially, it's very valuable for a company and its shareholders and the broader economy, where one can have powerful, successful brands, because that, of course, allows you to charge a premium that is good for the company and I think good for the overall economy as well.
Yeah, Mr. Hong Hao, I mean, in the world of ideological differences, geopolitical tensions, trade and economic and tech sanctions, do you see those as barriers for a country's brand to be recognized and purchased by consumers from other countries?
Yeah, well, those are the hurdles that we have to overcome. Those are the challenges, internal challenges that we have to face. But then at the same time, there are already successful stories that is growing out of China. For example, TikTok, we mentioned just now, is now one of the most downloaded app on the Apple App Store. Huawei is, if it's not for the semiconductor shortage, I'm sure that many of the foreign users would be happy to buy it. And Xiaomi is conquering Southeast Asia, right? So I think there are many very good stories already. And I think going forward, with the improved understanding of the Chinese culture, Chinese ideology, and also what the Chinese people's value are, I'm pretty sure that many more Chinese brands will be growing out of the boundary of China and being accepted and welcomed by international customers.
Victor, how do you feel? I mean, do car makers like yours feel the resistance, let's say, from geopolitical tensions and policy uncertainties in the past few years?
We do see some challenge, but I think overall the car industry is still global in nature. We have to open our arms to work with global partners to create new technology, new business model, at the same time to invest together to offset the risk from the great technology transformation. But from product level, I think we have include very intricate Chinese cultural element in the design of our cars. If you see of cars by yourself, you can see that the combination of a Chinese element on the global design language fits well to both Chinese consumer and consumer in other part of the world. I can give you an example. We are, say, introducing our new products to Proton in Malaysia, which is it's called X50, which is called Bingyue here in China. But we have 6 months waiting list from the Malaysian consumer on these products. It's selling like hotcakes. I do not see a big challenge from the Chinese brand identity to
yeah, you know what, Victor, hopefully more of those examples will emerge where challenges are overcome. That's all the time we have. Sorry to cut you. Yeah. Thank you, Victor, Andy, and Mr. Hong Hao. Fascinating discussion. I learned a lot. And thank you for watching Dialogue. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing.